Neddie and Beckie Stubtail. Story 10, Neddie and the Elephant. It was the day after Thanksgiving. Neddie and Beckie Stubtail, the two little bear children, awoke in the barn where the circus man kept all his animals during the winter. When he was not giving a show in the big tent, Neddie and Beckie felt very nice and comfortable, for they had had a good holiday dinner when they had almost given up expecting one. They had a nice, warm place to sleep, and they were happier than at any time since they had run away from home to join George, the big trained bear, and the professor, his master, who led George around by a chain fast to a ring in his nose. "Are you there, Netty?" called Beckie from her bed in the nice clean sawdust. She was hugging her doll, Mary Ann Pudding Stick Clothespin. "Of course I am here," answered Netty, blinking both his eyes and wiggling his little short tail. "Aren't you glad you ran away now with me, sister, so you can become a trained bear?" "Yes, I guess so," answered Beckie. "Still, I'd like to see my mamma and nice fat Aunt Piffy just once." "Oh, we'll go back home pretty soon," said Netty, "when we have earned some money. Then Mamma and Papa will forgive us for running away." "I hope so," went on Beckie, "and I hope that Uncle Wigwag won't play any jokes on us." "Oh, he's sure to do that, but we mustn't mind," said Netty, as he hopped up and shook the sawdust out of his ears. George, the tame bear who did tricks, was already up, and he was waltzing around to where a lot of monkey ladies were getting breakfast for the circus animals. Then the professor, who led George around by the nose when the bear did tricks, stretched out and yawned and said to the circus man, "It was very kind of you to let us stay here all night." "Pray not to mention it," said the circus man politely. "I hope you rested well." "Yes, but I did not get to sleep very early," said the bear professor. "I think perhaps I ate too much mince pie with strawberry ice cream on it." "And I didn't sleep very good either," went on Beckie, "but it was because the elephant snored so that I was afraid he would shake the roof down on our heads." "Oh, you mustn't mind that," said the circus man with a laugh. "Nosy, that's the elephant's name, you see, really never does any harm. He's as gentle as a kitten and as playful as a frog." "Well, I wouldn't like him to jump on me," said Netty with a laugh. "He's a good bit larger than Bully the frog, who lives near the beaver pond back home." Then breakfast was ready, and the monkey ladies waited on the tables at which the circus animals sat, and, in order that they would not step on their own tails, the monkey ladies tied them around their necks in a double bow. This made them look nice, and also kept them from catching cold in their ears. Neddie and Beckie Stubtail had a good breakfast, and they were thinking of staying with the circus man instead of going off looking for adventures with George, the professor, when the circus man called, "All ready now, first class in somersaults." "Why, he sounds just like our school teacher," exclaimed Netty. "I didn't think we'd have school when we left our home." "This isn't regular school," explained the circus man, "but my animals have to study their lessons just the same. How do you think an elephant could waltz and play a hand organ, to say nothing of standing on a tub and wagging his tail, if he did not have lessons and practice them? Of course, we have to have a sort of school." "And I think I'll send Neddie and Beckie to it," said the professor. "They could learn tricks then much better than I could teach them, and George and I would have more time to collect pennies and buns and popcorn balls." "Would you like to go to school to me and learn tricks?" asked the circus man of the bear children, and they said they would. "Very well, then," said the circus man, "and as I have taught my new elephant how to stand on his head, I'll begin and give you a lesson." Then the new elephant, who as yet knew hardly any tricks, had to get out in the middle of the sawdust ring and learn to stand on his head. It was not easy either. One of the older elephants had to show the new elephant a number of times before he could do it even a little bit. But finally he could, and the circus man said, "Now stay standing on your head for 10 minutes, Frisco. It will be good practice for you. Don't get down. Stay right as you are. Now then, second class in fast running." And the circus man took a lot of ponies over to one side of the barn to have them practice for races. And all the while Frisco, the new elephant, had to stand on his head. The professor took George the bear off to one side of the circus barn to teach his pet a new trick, and as Beckie had to wash and dress her rubber doll, Netty was left with nothing to do. So he walked over and watched the new elephant learning the trick of standing on his head. "Do you like it?" asked Netty, the bear boy of the elephant. "Oh, yes, I don't mind," said the big creature. "Oh, dear," he suddenly cried. "Oh, me, oh, my," and a big tear about as large as a cup of water came to each of the elephant's eyes. "Why, what is the matter?" asked Netty kindly. "Oh, my back itches me something terrible," said Frisco the elephant, "and I daren't get down from standing on my head to scratch it. Oh, dear." Now, if there is one thing worse than another, it is to have an itchy place where you can't scratch it. Netty knew this as well as anybody. It's as bad as wanting to sneeze when someone scares you out of it, and really, that's the very worst thing that can happen. "Oh, my," went on the elephant, and he wiggled about and tried to scratch the itchy place on his back, but he couldn't. And he didn't dare get down from standing on his head for fear the circus man would be angry at him, and oh, such a lot of trouble as he had. But Netty thought of a plan. "How would you like to have me scratch your back for you, Frisco?" asked the little bear boy. "I won't dig my claws in very deep. Shall I scratch you?" "If you only would," sighed the elephant. So Netty gently scratched the big creature who was standing on his head. "Ah, that is lovely. I feel so much better now," said the elephant. "I can stand this way as long as I have to." But he did not have to stand on his head much longer, for the circus man came over pretty soon and said to Frisco, "That will do. You recited your lesson very nicely. Now you may go to the kitchen and get a lump of sugar." And the elephant did, a large lump, for he had a large mouth, you know. "Now, Neddie Stubtail, I think I'll see what sort of lesson trick I will give you to study," went on the circus man. "First, let me see you climb up this pole." There was a big round pole, like a telegraph one, sticking up in the middle of the circus barn floor. "Oh, I can't do that," said Netty. But when he remembered how he and Beckie had once gone up the telegraph pole the time the skillery-scalery alligator was after them, up and up went Netty, sticking his claws into the soft wood. Beckie, watching her brother, felt very proud of him, and so did George, the tame, trained bear. Netty was almost at the top when all of a sudden the pole began to tip over and over and over. "Oh, it's falling," cried Beckie. "Netty, look out, you'll be hurt." No one knew what to do. There was great excitement. The lions roared and the tigers snarled. Then Frisco, the elephant, who had practiced standing on his head, and whose back Netty had so kindly scratched, came rushing up, swallowing the last of his lump of sugar, and this elephant cried, "Make way for me. I am strong. I can hold that pole until you make it fast so it won't fall. I'll save Netty." And the elephant did. In his strong trunk he held that pole up straight until other elephants nailed it to make it firm and steady. Then Netty could come safely down. The elephant had saved him, so you see you should always scratch an elephant's back when you can. And now, about the next story. Let me see. I think, in case the feathers in the lady's hat do not tickle the milk pitcher so that if it falls on the table and spills all the cream, I'll tell you about Beckie and the monkey. Story 11. Beckie and the Monkey. Many things happened to Neddie and Beckie Stubtail, the little bear boy and girl, while they stayed with the circus man in the barn where they had their Thanksgiving dinner. Oh, many, many things happened, but I have only room to tell you of a few of them. The two little bear cubs had been in the circus barn about a week, and though they liked it very much, and though George, the tame trained bear, and his master, the professor, and the other man, and the elephant, and the lions, and the tigers were all very kind to Neddie and Beckie, they began to wish they were home. I'm sort of sorry we ran away, said Beckie one morning, as she put a new dress on her rubber doll, Mary Ann Pudding Stick Clothespin. It was only her own pocket handkerchief that Beckie used for a doll's dress, but it did very well for all that. I guess I'm a bit sorry too, said Netty. We have learned some tricks, to be sure, and I can turn a somersault almost as good as George can, but still it isn't as much fun as I thought it would be. I guess running away never is, said Beckie. But we had some fun, went on Nettie. Do you mean the time you did the trick of climbing the pole here in the barn, and it toppled over with you and the elephant had to hold it up? Asked Beckie. Was that fun? I was too scared to think it was funny, but it might have been jolly for the others, laughed Nettie. Then the two little bear children, who had run away from their home in the cave house on the side of the hill, walked around the circus barn. They listened to the lions having their roaring lessons, in which the seals, who juggled their rubber balls on the ends of their noses, also joined. Then Neddie and Beckie looked at the tall giraffes take a lesson in picking oranges off the top rafters of the barn, and at the hippopotamus, who had to have his sore throat looked at by Dr. Possum, who always attended the sick circus animals. My, you have a very sore throat, said Dr. Possum to the hippopotamus when he had looked at it. The hippo opened his mouth so wide that Dr. Possum could get right inside, which he did, sitting on the hippo's tongue in order to see better. Yes, a very sore throat, went on Dr. Possum. You must gargle it. So he gave the hippo some medicine, and the hippo gargled his throat, and really he made such a funny noise, like thunder, doing it that Beckie and Nettie had to laugh, and that made the hippo sneeze so that he could not gargle. When are we going out traveling around again? Asked Nettie of the professor and George. Are we always going to stay here with the circus animals? No, indeed, answered the professor as he blew a nice tune on his brass horn. But it is getting too cold for traveling now and sleeping out in the woods. Besides, all the children are saving up their pennies for Christmas, and they will not drop any in my cap when I go around after George has done his tricks. So I think we will stay with the kind circus man and his pets for some time, at least until it gets warmer. Meanwhile, Nettie, I want to show you a new trick that you can do with George. I'll have you ride on his shoulders, carrying a broom, and I think that will make the people laugh, and when people laugh, they give you more pennies than otherwise. Oh, goody, I'm going to learn another trick, cried Nettie in delight. Then the professor took the little bear boy off to one side of the barn, near the place where the elephants slept in the hay, and, with the big, kind, tame bear George, they practiced the new trick, the professor blowing a tooting toot-toot tune on his brass horn very once in a while. This left Beckie to play by herself, but she was not lonesome, for she had her rubber doll to take care of her, and she could watch the hippo gargle his big red flannel throat, and she looked at the monkeys doing tricks in their cages. Beckie was not very lonesome, but perhaps if she and Nettie could have seen what was going on back in their cave house by the hill, they would have run to their papa and mamma as fast as their legs would take them, for Mr. and Mrs. Stubtail were very lonesome for their children. So when Aunt Piffy, the fat bear lady, and also Uncle Wigwag and Mr. Whitewash, the polar bear. If my children do not soon come home to me, said Mrs. Stubtail, wiping her eyes on her apron, I don't know what I shall do. I know, said Mr. Whitewash. Uncle Wiggly Longears, the rabbit gentleman, and I will start off and find them. If Uncle Wiggly could find his fortune, he can find lost children. "That is a good idea," said Papa Stubtail. "If Neddie and Beckie do not come back, I'll get Uncle Wiggly after them." And all this while, mind you, Neddie and Beckie were in the circus barn. Well, after Beckie had given her rubber doll a nice wash in the parrot's bathtub, the little bear girl heard someone crying. At first she thought it might be some bad animal pretending to be in trouble so as to catch something for his supper. Then Beckie remembered that she was safe in the circus barn, where all the animals were her friends. So she looked around, and there she saw a great big grandfather monkey crying and holding his face in his paw. He was all hunched up and stooped over as if he hadn't a friend in the world, and he looked very sorrowful. "Oh, what is the matter?" asked Beckie kindly. "I have a terrible toothache," said the monkey gentleman. "Oh, that's too bad," exclaimed Beckie. She knew what a toothache was, once having had one herself. "Why don't you do something for it?" she asked. "I don't know what to do," said the grandfather monkey. "That is, unless I have it pulled, and I don't want to do that." "I don't blame you," said Beckie. "Still, it might be better to have it out." "If they could just pull out the ache and leave the tooth in, I would not mind it so much," went on the monkey. "But when they pull the tooth just to get out the ache, that's too much. Oh dear," and he almost stood up on the end of his tail, the pain was so bad. Beckie glanced about the circus barn. No one seemed to be looking after the toothache monkey. All the other monkeys were practicing on their hand organs, and all the other animals were reciting their different lessons. Beckie and the old grandfather monkey were all by themselves. "I know what I'll do," said the little bear girl. "I'll just slip out and go to Dr. Possum's and get some toothache medicine for you. That may stop your pain." "Oh, will you?" cried the grandpa monkey. "That will be very kind of you." So Beckie left her rubber doll asleep and slipped out of the circus barn where no one was looking. She hurried to Dr. Possum's office and got some very strong medicine. Then, when she went back, she put some on some cotton, and then she put the cotton in the hole of the monkey's tooth, and soon it was all better. Then, as Beckie had nothing else to do, she thought she would go to sleep with her doll. When she did, lying down in the soft, clean sawdust, Beckie slept and slept, and so she did not see the bad old skillery-scalery alligator slip in through the barn door, which she had left open when she came in with the toothache medicine. Nearer and nearer came the alligator to Beckie. She did not see him. Neither did Netty, nor the circus man, nor the professor, nor George, the big bear. Or they might have driven him away. "Aha, now I'll get her," whispered the alligator to himself. "She is asleep and can't see me. I'll just carry her off to my den, and then, we shall see what will happen then." But Beckie was not to be carried off by the gator. All of a sudden, the grandpa monkey, whose toothache was all better now, saw the skillery-scalery creature. "Wake up, Beckie, wake up," cried the good monkey. "Get out of the way, and I'll attend to that alligator." Beckie awakened and rolled out of the way just in time, or the alligator might have grabbed her. Then the monkey took 4 pawfuls of sawdust and threw it in the eyes of the alligator, and down his throat and into his mouth and nose and ears, making the gator sneeze 11 times, and whenever a gator sneezes that way, he can't harm anybody. That's what happened to the skillery-scalery alligator, and away he went, taking his humpy-bumpy tail with him. So Beckie was saved, which shows that you should always stop a monkey's toothache when you can. Then the bear children and the circus animals had their supper, and there was pickled ice cream for those who wanted it. And, in the next story, if the baby doesn't sit down in the peach basket so tightly that we have to take a poker to get her out, I'll tell you about Neddie and Beckie going back home. Story 12. Neddie and Beckie Go Home. "Oh, Neddie," exclaimed Beckie Stubtail, the little bear girl, as she rolled over in the clean shavings on the floor of the barn where the circus animals stayed during the cold winter months. "Oh, Neddie, I've just thought of the nicest game we can play. Oh, it's just too lovely for anything." "Pooh, a girl's game," answered Netty. the boy bear, as he looked under a pile of sawdust to see if he could find a popcorn ball, or maybe an ice cream cone. Mind, I'm not saying for sure, but maybe. Anyhow, Nettie found nothing good to eat, so it doesn't make any difference. I don't want to play any girl games, went on Nettie. I don't call Nettie very polite myself, but then you may think differently. Beckie looked sort of disappointed, and her paws, in which she was holding Mary Ann Puddingstick Clothespin, her rubber doll, trembled a little, and Beckie thought sure she was going to have to use her pocket handkerchief, which is just the same as your handkerchief, to wipe her tears away. For Beckie was lonesome, and she wanted her mamma, and the little girl bear wished she hadn't run away from home with her brother to go with the professor and George, the big, tame, trained bear with the ring in his nose. Yes, indeed, Beckie was sorry she had run away. I guess Nettie was sorry too, for after pawing about a bit in the sawdust, he looked at his sister, and when he saw her lips quivering, and that she was trying to reach for her handkerchief without him seeing it, then Nettie did what he should have done at first and said, "Oh, well, Beckie, maybe a girl's game would be nice after all. We aren't doing much here. Tell me about it." "I will," said Beckie, and she brightened up and smiled as well as little girl bears can smile, and she patted her little rubber doll and said, "Now, Nettie, just as soon as Mary Ann Puddingstick Clothespin is asleep, I'll tell you about the trick I thought up all by myself." So Nettie waited until the rubber doll should close her eyes and go fast, fast asleep. It took some time. "Well, isn't that doll asleep yet?" asked Nettie after a bit. He was anxious to know what trick Beckie was going to tell about. "Hush, yes, she's asleep," said the little bear girl. "Come on, we'll go over near where the elephants are eating their peanuts, and I'll tell you all about it." "Will you kindly watch over Mary Ann Puddingstick Clothespin?" asked Beckie of the big hippopotamus. "I will," answered the river horse, yawning until it looked as if someone had opened a big red flannel bag. So large was the hippo's mouth. "Now for my trick," said Beckie when she and her little brother were over on the side of the circus barn where the elephants lived. "I was thinking, Nettie, that if we could get a long plank or board, we could put it over the back of one of the big elephants. Then you could get on one end of the board, and I'll get on the other, and we would seesaw and teeter-totter up and down, and the people who watched us would like the trick very much." "Yes, I think that would be fine," cried Nettie. "Why, that isn't the girl's trick at all. It's good enough for any of the boys. We'll do it, and maybe we'll get a lot of sweet buns and some lollipops, too. Why, that's as good a trick as some that George does." And George was pretty good trick bear, too, let me tell you. When the professor blew his brass horn, ta-ra, ta-ra, ra, ta, ta-ra, George would somersault or peppersault and march like a soldier, and then do all things like that. Well, Neddie and Beckie found a long teetery-tottery plank in the barn, and then they asked the kind old elephant, who had once helped Nettie, if he would let them put it on his back for a seesaw. "Why, to be sure I will," kindly said the elephant, and with his long, rubbery, stretchy trunk, he put the plank on his own back, for it was quite too heavy for Neddie and Beckie to lift so high. "But I wonder how we are going to get up on the plank now?" asked the little girl bear. "You can climb up my neck if you don't scratch me too much," said the spotted giraffe, who was as tall as a stepladder. So Nettie climbed up the neck of one giraffe on one side of the elephant, and Beckie climbed up another giraffe on the other side, the bear children taking care not to scratch the tall, spotted creatures. Then the little bear cubs got on the plank over the elephant's back, both at the same time, balancing themselves nicely, and then they began to teeter-totter. Up and down they went, while Beckie sang the song, "Teeter-totter, bread and water, up and down we go. Sometimes I'm very high, then again I'm low." Well, the bear cubs were having a fine time when along came the circus man and the professor, who owned George, the trained bear. The two men, who could speak and understand bear and all other animal languages, watched Neddie and Beckie doing the teeter-totter trick Beckie had thought up all by herself. "That's pretty good," said the circus man, speaking bear talk and nodding toward the two little bears. "Yes, indeed," said the professor. Then the two of them talked for some time in their own language, which Beckie and Netty could not understand very well. Beckie and Netty felt very proud that the circus man and the professor should like their trick, but a little later, when the pole parrot came over to them and told them something, they did not feel so happy. The pole parrot said, "Oh, you don't know what I heard. I heard those two men talking about you two little bears. I can understand man talk, and talk it myself, you see." "What did they say?" asked Netty, sliding down off the teeter-totter. That let Beckie come down suddenly with a bump, but she fell in a pile of soft shavings, so she did not get hurt in the least. "What did they say?" asked the parrot. "Why, I've heard them say that they were going to dress you two bears up like clowns, and make you go down south where it is warm weather, even if it's winter up here. Down there the professor is going to take you and George and an elephant and make you do that seesaw trick. Oh, you're going to have to be taken away from here." Beckie and Netty looked at each other. They had never thought such a thing would happen when they did their little trick. "Oh dear," cried Beckie as she thought of going farther and farther away from her home and her mamma. "I wish we'd never run away, Netty." "So do I," exclaimed Netty, "but I'll not let them send us down south. Listen, Beckie, we must run away again, only this time we'll run back home." "Oh, goody," cried Beckie, clapping her paws. "Come on right away," said Netty. "We'll go before the professor and the circus man can see us." So the two little bear children slipped out of the back door of the barn. They wished they could kiss George, the big kind bear, goodbye, but it was impossible, which means you can't do it. Oh, how fast Netty and Beckie ran. Over the fields and through the woods they went, until the circus barn was left far, far behind. And finally, just as night was coming on, the two little children bears reached the cave in the side of the hill where they lived, and they were safe home again. And oh, how glad their papa and mamma and Aunt Piffy, the fat bear lady, were to see them. And of course, Mr. Whitewash, the polar bear, and Uncle Wigwag, the trick-playing bear, were so glad also. And oh, such a good supper as Neddie and Beckie had. "We're never going to run away again," they said. So that's all to this story. But in the next one, if the dog barking at the moon in our backyard doesn't take off his collar and tie it on my pussycat's neck, I'll tell you about Neddie Stubtail and the little Wuzzy Fuzzy Tail.